afternoon, Robert.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mark. It's great to be with you.
I'm glad to you are here.
Yeah,
We got a chance to hang out for
yeah,
the first hour or so,
yeah,
catching up, getting just to hear what the Lord was saying in our hearts,
yeah.
and then we just jumped over to the studio side. Um, it's very important to me at the Father's house that we have this continuing opportunity to share revelation, to share
Mm,
things that are on our heart. Because sometimes just coming on a Sunday morning for that little 30-minute, 40-minute
oh yeah,
message,
yeah,
and then thank God there's life groups, there's places we can connect, but this is just one more spot that we can
right.
interject to help the body of Christ. I know how busy we all are. So hopefully this will help all of us.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so, Robert Baxter, we're so glad
Hey,
to have you in. I'm looking forward to hearing you Sunday as usual. I don't think I've ever not enjoyed something you've shared.
wow. Well, thank you.
No problem. One of the cool things, little fun fact with you as well, is I've been part of the Father's House, which used to be the Purple Church years ago,
Yes.
and all the. So you, out of all the ministries that have come to the Father's House, has been the one consistent one from day one, and of
Mm,
all the
mm.
transitions and everything. So how many years do you think that was?
Wow. If I'm not mistaken, Catherine, my wife, visited the Purple Church first before I did, and met with the pastors at that time. And if I'm not mistaken, she was pregnant with our second.
Oh wow,
And our second now is 30 years old and has three children. Okay, uh, so in other words, our first contact with the Father's house would have been 31 years ago, about.
wow,
Yeah,
that's a long time.
yeah. It's been a wonderful journey, and it's meant a lot to us. And just knowing you and Lisa as well. Just it's been such a blessing. Um, Yeah, the Father's house has been a great blessing to us over the years.
Well, we feel the same. Um, we've in those 30 something years, like when you said you were a hot mess in the beginning, and so there's a journey in this story somewhere,
Oh
obviously.
yeah, oh yeah,
The evolution of being able to be more transformed into Christ's image through this journey. We talked a little bit about
yeah,
that, the things I used to think even just sometimes a week ago, or maybe a
yeah.
message I
Oh
gave
my
not too
gosh.
long ago. We're still being
Yes,
awakened,
yes, absolutely.
and it's an
Yeah,
amazing journey.
it is.
And but to know and hear you for so many years and watch our journey, and I feel like every time you do come, we get a chance to connect.
Yeah,
I always feel like it's genuine, it's authentic.
yeah,
There's always meat in it. It's just not surface talk, and I
yeah.
do feel that part of you is, we talked right before we even turned the cameras on, that you have this ability to connect to people because you
Mm.
actually are interested in people.
Yeah, generally speaking. I mean, there might be the occasional ones to,
Sure.
cross paths with. You got to go, oh boy, I really don't want to get to know that guy very much. But and then there are times that that you really are taken by the love of Christ
Sure.
into a place
That's right.
that's not your love,
That's right.
and that's good too.
Yes.
And that's always a time of discovery. So even though there may be people that I might, in my flesh, like, oh Lord Jesus, uh, deliver me. But at the same time, you follow the love of Christ, and His love will always take you to a place that you're uncomfortable, and yet there's something of Him that you're going to discover there, in that place of discomfort. And it's not always just to. I think too, Mark, the thing, if I've learned one thing throughout life, it's not always about um, it's not always about like touching people, like ministry being, you've got to get out there and exercise your ministry and do ministry. And it, I know this sounds so canned, but it is, I don't know that there's anything more true. It's really it's all always a question of knowing Him and just walking with Him,
Yeah, you
you
said
know?
something that really, I just picked up on. You said it's not always about doing ministry; it's really
Yeah,
being ministry.
yeah, yeah,
In the essence
right.
of being a human being, not a human doing. We've heard that a million times, but I mean, I can't tell you
Yeah.
even in the beginning how I think my immaturity really pushed me to feel like I had to prove something.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
then you flip the switch into ministry mode, right? It's like that's even when your voice can change sometimes when you're preaching and or you're going to pray for something and you
yeah.
kind of scare people
Yeah.
because you get intense and you're like and
Yes.
you begin
Yes.
to go into ministry mode.
Right. Right.
But just
Right.
can we be authentic
Yeah.
enough to walk with the Lord? And I think if we're not even authentic with each other, then we're probably really not authentic with the Lord.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There was one time way many years ago, and I think I was just recently in ministry. So we're talking, like the early 90s. No, even before that, or the mid 80s. And I was going through a really tough time. Actually, it's been odd. I'm always in a tough time. But anyway, I was going through a particular tough time, and I was on my face. I'd been fasting, and I'm just like howling, and giving God all these King James sort of prayers. And I remember the Holy Spirit stopped me. He says, "Who do you sound like?" And it shocked me. I thought, well, what do you mean? Who do I sound like? I mean, I sound like. Then I thought, well, actually, yeah, this is not how I talk to anybody. So who do I sound like? And I started thinking about it, and I thought, you know what? Because I was really like into Copeland at the
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
Kenneth Copeland, and a couple of other guys like that. And I thought, oh my gosh, I sound just like Kenneth Copeland. And and I felt like the Spirit said, well, why do you think I'm going to listen to you more
Yeah.
if you sound like somebody else? I thought, well, because you always answer their prayers. So maybe if I sound like them, you'll answer mine.
Okay.
He says, and the Lord said to me, he says, son, I will always hear you the way I created you to be.
That's good.
But if you start acting like somebody else, I don't hear you. And wow, talk about a lesson in Mark. And that's why I realized prayer is not a performance. It really is just communion. We used to write in my calendar, prayer time. And even that, I looked at that and I thought, prayer time, like prayer is an activity.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that's not prayer time, it's father time. So if you look at my schedule, you'll see father time because it's time with my father.
Sure.
I don't want my kids to like, if I'm going to take my daughter on a date, and I still do, both my girls are married, and, one has 3 kids now. And actually, right before I left for this trip, she called me and said, Dad, we haven't been on a date in a long time. Here she is, a brand new mama for the 3rd time, and
Wow.
we still go on dates. And but can you imagine, like, if I looked at her calendar and she said, this is I don't know, talk time or confession time or counsel time. It's not. It's dad time. I'm not a thing she does. I'm a person that I take such joy in her presence, and she doesn't even have to say anything. We can just sit there on a couch or look at the trees, and that's enough. There's nothing else to. You don't have to say things.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man doesn't go too long without creating his own religion, thinking he is
Yeah. So
in a
true.
relationship or a formula or a method. But the funny thing about it is I feel like the Lord, he allows us sometimes to create a method long enough, then we realize why isn't it working anymore? And then we start going,
Right.
where are you at? What did I do
Yeah.
wrong? It's like because he couldn't allow the method to become
Right.
a relationship.
Yes. So true. I do think, and it's interesting you bring that up because I was just meditating on that this past week. I got into a stale kind of place in my communion with the Lord.
Mm.
And it happens, there's these ebbs and flows in every relationship you have. Nothing is static. It's not like you turn on your computer and you get the exact same stuff because it's a computer. Relationships don't work like that.
Right.
The relationships are always dynamic, always there's ebbs and flows. And I was just in a kind of a down period. And I don't know how to explain it. Maybe I was a little overworked, a little tired, mentally distracted. But here's the thing, I do think there's a place for discipline
Mm. Agreed.
in every relationship.
Yes.
I mean, even with me and my wife, it's like, okay, hey, this is our date night, or this is our time together. And, well, we're not really feeling it. but we have that thing planned because we value the relationship. So I do think there is a place for discipline, but you're right. I think methods, God's never looking for methods. He's looking for men. He's
Sure.
looking for people, relationships. Like you said, authenticity. And that's in the world we live in today, being authentic. You have to be very secure to be authentic.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And if you think about it in the beginning, even when we started in ministry, you're answering the call of God, which is his calling,
Right.
not mine.
Right.
Right. So if I can get that right somewhere along the path, then I'll stop trying to
Yeah.
build my own kingdom.
Right.
But during your journey into authenticity, right? How much fire, how much time, how much all the circumstances of life work in your favor while you don't even realize it's happening.
Yeah.
Even while we're doing methods or formulas, he's still so loving and so caring
Yeah.
that he uses it all.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question and a great comment. If I were to like chronicle all of the trials and tribulations and the testings and the breakings, um, not only would I be convinced that my whole life is nothing but one constant breaking after another, but the people listening to the stories would probably get depressed and go, well, I don't want the call of God if it's like that. But
Right.
if I were like to start listing all of the blessings, all of the things that I get to do, actually, I cross paths with my brother, and I think I can share this because he won't see this video. Uh, but my brothers take care of my mom and live as a live-in. He and his wife live with my mom, and so when any of us other siblings come, they have time off. So we crossed paths for a couple of hours just before I got settled in, and they left. And he looked at me, looked at the rental car I'm driving, and he just looked at me and goes, man, bro, you are so spoiled. And there two thoughts came to me simultaneous. The first thought was, you have no clue the breaking I've gone through to be where I am.
Come on.
The second thought, which came simultaneous, was, I get to do some really cool stuff with God that I'm not worthy of doing, but wow, just like, this is so cool.
Like a divine spoiling.
Yeah, it is. And so it's like he saw the rental car like some sort of, I don't know, maybe a status thing. I just wanted a comfortable, secure ride. I didn't care.
Sure.
But because I do it so much, I get these upgrades. But I could care less. I really could care less. Give me a bicycle, and I'll find contentment unless it's pouring rain. Then I might complain a little bit. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't matter. But those two thoughts that flooded my soul simultaneous. If you had any idea of the breaking and the price that was paid, but at the same time, wow, if I told you about all the cool stuff that I get to do with Jesus,
Yeah.
anybody would be jealous,
Come on.
And I think those two things always are running parallel.
Right.
And so when we try to renegotiate the price, you know what we're doing? We're selling short the benefits that we get later on.
Yes.
That's all we're doing.
Yes.
God will let us stop at any point in our walk with him. He'll let us stop. He'll go, if you convince God, if you are so convinced that what God's requiring of you is you don't have what it takes to pay, which actually that's the great mystery. We never have enough money to pay the price. It's given to us.
That's right.
So even the gold we have to pay to go through the trial, we don't actually possess that. It's given to us when we say yes. I'll go there.
Yes.
It's not given me before. You have to take that step of faith. But so, when we do I don't want that. I don't want to pay that price. My marriage is too hard I don't want to go any further. You know, I don't get fed in this church. I don't want to go any further. I don't want to become one of the cooks in the kitchen. I don't want to abandon my place at the table of just a consumer and become a cook. I'd rather go find another place where I can just sit at the table and eat and not have to cook. And we have far too many Christians like that. So anytime we renegotiate the price, all we're doing is we're stopping that aspect of God's destiny that we've been born for, we've been created for, molded for, specifically called for, to walk into something that is just so beyond us that and that's where we find this joy of living sort of a martyr's life, because we get to do so many cool things, but all along the way, there's all these prices, that all the breakings. I tell people, don't worry, I live in the land of the guillotine. Just stand up enough, you're going to get your head cut off. It's just inevitable. It comes with the territory. So just you have to accept it. I don't know. I'm kind of going on and on about it, but I really want to encourage people, don't sell short the destiny of God on your life.
Absolutely.
You have to believe you're called to do something greater than you. It's not the great that somebody else is called to, but it's the great that you're called to.
Sure.
Yeah.
I love how you said earlier, when you started your topic there was, it's not about trying to turn people off and saying, if you follow the Lord, this, and this. Really, the reality of it is all those issues and all that fire and all of that time and all that striving to enter into his rest, it actually leads you to rest.
Yes, it does.
It actually awakens you to a place where you begin to realize, oh man, I'm actually seeing God in a more healthy way. He's not as disfigured as the first time I walked.
Yeah.
He's not as, the distorted image is now getting a little bit more clearer.
Yeah.
And if you really think about it, if we don't have contrast, how can we ever possibly grow up?
Right.
Because if we didn't have contrast, we'd already be in heaven.
Right.
We'd already be crossed over where there's no tears. You can't grow like we can grow on earth.
Right.
This is the big school.
Yeah.
This is the place that we get to put faith in action. Corinthians 13 says when love comes and it all ends, we're not going to need any of that.
Right. Right.
We're going to be in him, moving. We're just going to be completely, absolutely free from everything. So why are we here if we're not willing to learn? And this is the opportunity to really get to know him.
Yeah. We give God glory here on earth through our growth.
Yes, absolutely.
Through growing. This is how we bring him glory, is by deciding to grow and to mature and to pursue maturity in him. In life, in this life, everything that is healthy is destined to grow. Things that are not healthy die. So the entire definition of life is growth, and I think it's so important. Sunday mornings, I'm not sure Sunday mornings or, whatever the particular time of the week, people have their worship service. And I tell our folks in Paris all the time, I said, listen, Sunday, you get fed, you don't grow. You get fed. There's a difference. You're fed and you're blessed. That's really all you can do in a couple hours. But it's not going to challenge you to grow. That challenging to grow happens outside of these 2 hours.
You got the truth.
And if the local church isn't intentional of building a culture that sustains that, then what you have is 20 years, 30 years, 50, 100 years down the road, you still have baby Christians sitting in those pews that are blessed, overfed, spiritually overweight, but probably with all kinds of spiritual diseases because they've never really figured out that I'm actually here not to be blessed. I'm here to grow.
Yes, that's so good. I'm sitting there thinking about those two things that you were even saying through this whole process, but that whole thing about being disciplined to be able to come in and be able to allow ourselves to hear the word of the Lord and allow it to have its perfect way in us in such a way that we don't go off to the next podcast, the next teaching. You know what I mean? So we're really
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like if we're not careful, me as a leader is actually I have to point the finger at me first.
Yeah.
Because if I'm willing to keep serving fish and never teach people how to fish, then at some point God wants me to change the insanity of it.
Yeah. Mark, this is a little bit of a soapbox,
Yeah.
and I hope I'm not cutting off a thought,
Yeah.
but I do have a little pet peeve about when I come to the American. It's amazing to me when Americans want to say something to me that they feel like will carry some sort of validity.
Right.
They say, "I heard this on a podcast." There's not a single member in my church. I'm not saying that the members in our church in Paris don't listen to podcasts, but when they have something to share with me, it's like, this is what I got from God.
Right.
I was reading the Bible, or I was in prayer, and God impressed this on me. Or I was studying the scripture the other day, and I came on this verse, and the Spirit of God spoke to me through this verse. Man, you've got 100% of my attention.
Right.
You get this through a podcast? I could care less. Stop sending me links to podcasts that spoke to you.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Right.
I really don't care. I do podcasts. I confess I do podcasts, but I don't watch podcasts. Or very, very, very few.
Right.
I'll watch this one, okay? But very, very few. But what I am interested in is that, hey, you spent the time to dig in with God. You got up early, sought the face of God, or took some time to fast and cried out to God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And God came to you. God met you. God spoke to you. That's what I put value on.
I'm even just already while you're saying that. I mean, in the scriptures, that's what Jesus did when Peter got his first revelation and heard the Father's voice.
Yeah.
Jesus
Right.
says, "Who do you say that I am?"
Right.
Right. And he was willing to know. Was it the podcast that told you who I am?
Yeah.
Was it the pulpit at some synagogue that told you who I am? But who do you say that I am?
Right.
And so for Jesus, for the first time, if you think about it,
Yeah.
heard another man in the
Yeah.
flesh suit hear his Father's voice, which made him rejoice and go, "Yes, Peter, flesh
Beautiful.
and blood hasn't revealed this to you, but
Yeah.
my Father in heaven." That had to be such an exciting moment
So
for Jesus.
true.
He celebrated the fact that another person on the earth, breakthrough just happened
Yes.
for the first time, because up to this point, I've been feeding. Peter, you just heard my Father. And not
Yeah.
only did you just hear my Father, this is how I'm going to build the church,
Yes.
of hearing
Yeah.
my Father's
Yeah.
voice.
Woo. Come on, brother.
That
Absolutely. That's
is
good.
why we get excited as pastors. I don't even want to, when I say pastors, people think titles.
Mm.
I'm just talking about our hunger to see other people awaken is
Yeah.
the DNA of God. That's why he sent his only begotten son, so that we would awaken and be reconciled back to him.
Yes.
We have the same excitement when someone comes up and goes, "Hey, I was in the Word," and they start to reveal revelation to us. And I really feel like maybe because we have used the pulpit for too long to find our identity as leaders, to use it for affirmation, for codependency, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it. Is it possible the pulpit is in the way of them entering into the veil that was torn? So what Moses used to do, he would go into the tent of meeting. He would go in because the Israelites were too scared to go. They said, "You go," and they were camped afar off. He would go into the holies of holies. The cloud would descend. He would hear from God himself, have to come back and have to relay what he heard to the camp because they were too scared to come in. Is it possible we are still using that same method?
Yeah. That's a great point.
Is it possible that we haven't been able to give enough understanding to walk in with people? Because, knowledge puffs up, and this intellectual mind of mine makes me feel like I can hedge myself in security somehow. The more knowledge I attain, somehow I've got some insurance.
Mm.
But when people start actually walking in the mind of Christ and understanding comes, a lot of times the room gets really quiet
Yeah.
because they're hearing something for the first time, or maybe a confirmation of something that's already been embedded in them. But if I keep preaching something they already know, I get a lot of amens and a lot of shouts. I'm just reinforcing something they already know.
Right.
What you're saying is there's coming into a place to hear God for yourself. It would be equivalent to me of, it would be such a tragedy to go to heaven and realize all of the capability for you to walk in on this earth,
Mm.
for us to walk in the kingdom of heaven and explore it in a way, but we've only didn't even darken the doors. We stood on the outside of the threshold.
Yeah.
It would be like a
Yeah.
little kid winning tickets to Disney for the first time in their life, but only be willing to sit in the parking lot.
Yeah.
It's just so, really think about the awakening that God really, and not so
Yeah.
that it's because for me, I look at more even like this, Robert, for me in my life more. It's not even me trying to discover me anymore. I just want to do the Father's will.
Yeah.
So when the Lord gets pleased because he had a purpose for you today, he had a purpose for that person I met in the grocery store. He has a purpose. So I'm really honored and privileged to do his will and stop looking for mine.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
transition of rest.
Right.
And then I can live in this creative place with him where I don't have to force it.
Yeah. I'm going through a phase where I'm studying the Stoics, the Roman Stoics, and the Greeks. And these guys, they're amazing level of wisdom and understanding of life. But so in the world, there is this potential for a really bad version of Robert and a really extraordinary version of Robert. But both of those are false versions. The true Robert is hidden in Christ. So how do I discover the true Robert? And it's not asking God, well, Lord, would you reveal to me the true Robert? The path for me to get to the true Robert is to get more and more in love with Jesus, become more and more just infused, I guess that's the word, with Jesus. And as Jesus is manifested in me, then the true Robert arises within me. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. What you behold is what you become.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you stare at sin all day, you're always going to see yourself as a sinner, and you're never going to come into the full nature of who you are. You're never going to understand you were made perfect because he's made perfect.
Right.
You already got the nature in you.
Right.
When you got born again, you got everything you're going to need, right? Your spirit was born again. It says you became a new creation, right?
That's right.
So if we can actually ask the Lord to show us what our nature looks like, he's actually going to reflect him.
Yeah.
It's him. I used to get confused because I used to think he shorted us at the cross, like he held something back.
Interesting.
Yeah, I used to sit there and think,
Wow.
okay, I need this, I need that. He would say to me, Mark, you have a new nature.
Yeah.
The minute you said yes, your spirit got recreated in me.
Yes.
Now, because what you're doing is you keep trying to find your will, but you don't realize every time you find another revelation of me, every time you get awakened to another part of me, you stare at that.
Yeah.
You actually find your identity by looking at me.
That's right.
You're trying to find your identity from the world. You're trying to find where do you fit. You're trying to fit. We're even in the church.
Yeah. Yes.
You're trying to find your place through religion, not through relationship.
That's right.
It's because there's a deficit somewhere that was in me
Yeah.
that needed affirmation, and I would navel gaze. I would
Yeah.
look at myself constantly and I would think about this. And this is not too long ago. The Lord said to me, he said, most everyone on the earth spends 99.9% of their day thinking about themselves.
Wow.
Even you sometimes, Mark. Even when you think you're doing right, you're still hedging yourself because what you're doing is you're still trying to fulfill your need.
Yes. Yeah.
I just want to fulfill his needs now.
Yeah.
I want him to have the precedence. And so what happens in my life is I find myself even thinking about my own sons. I can sit there and think it's a righteous thing, like trying to tell my sons, don't do this, don't do that. I know you're 22 and you're 24, but I'm still trying my best to be that father. And the Lord's like, you know what? You're not really letting them be free. You're not really setting them free. What you're really doing is you're trying to control an outcome so that you don't have to deal with their bad choices. It's such a fine line of how much I think of myself. It's not in the purest context of I trust you with them.
Yes.
There's a place to intervene, but I suppose to know nothing till he speaks. That should be my motto.
Yeah.
But I interject through opinion and intellect, to confirmation biases. All the things that I've built up in my
Mm,
life hedges me so I can't be in that true union with the Lord. And actually, the
mm.
very fact that I'm not in union with the Lord means I'm probably living in the past or the present. I mean, the past or the future, and I'm not even living in the present.
Wow. Wow.
But if you think about it, if he's the truth, he's the way, and he is life. The only way you can find that is in the present. Truth
That's
is
right.
always present.
Absolutely. Yes.
But truth can also decide to take you to the past,
Yeah.
or he can take you into the future, but he has to be present. You have to be present
Yeah.
with him. And I think a lot of what you were saying is our identity is really lost in everybody else's opinions, our
Yeah.
circumstances, what the world is shouting out to us, and we're trying to dig out of a hole that he's already dug us out of.
Yeah.
If we're not careful, we start digging a hole, and he's like, "What are you doing?" You could
Yeah.
be leaning against the well of life and going, "I'm thirsty."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like it's the awakening for me. It's the hunger of what we going back to what Jesus rejoiced when they came to the conclusion, or Peter came to the conclusion, that you are the Son of God.
Yeah.
There's this awakening aha moment
Yeah.
that makes me and you probably get really excited
Yeah.
when people come around us and they start revealing what you were saying earlier. They start revealing what the Lord's showing them. And now all of a sudden you begin to realize the fivefold ministry out of Ephesians 4. What's the whole point to have the whole fivefold ministry if we're not going to mature?
The fivefold ministry only exists for
For
this
the maturity.
purpose of maturity.
Exactly. And so, therefore, I think going back to what you were saying earlier about the podcast, the things that we're awakening to, even me as a leader, I have to be careful that I don't allow the pulpit to be the door that I shut on them,
Mm,
because I'm so good and so enjoy feeding people. It's got
mm,
this reciprocal dependence upon they need me, I need them.
mm.
But the reality of it is, at some point, there's going to be some places in our hearts that God's going to ask us to be brave. You're going to have to do it differently.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? Well, the people will never receive that, Lord. Well, then you're not going in the direction. You're not letting me lead the dance anymore,
Yeah.
Mark. You just stepped on my toes, and
That's
you're leading the
right.
dance
Come
now.
on. Well, we just went through that whole thing. A year and a half ago, we transferred the senior pastorate to the brother that had been standing with me as my associate for over 20 years. And there's one particular Sunday. So we would always have the pastoral, the core pastoral team sitting on the front row, and then just the administrative staff, a couple of the administrative staff sitting right behind us.
Right.
And it was just for functional purposes. It had nothing to do with hierarchies and stuff like that. It was just purely functional, because there was always issues going on during the meeting, so that rather than us getting too distracted, we could just turn around and say to somebody, "Hey, can you do no 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 no?" Or, "Hey, I forgot to photocopy this, and can you run and do that?" And it was functional in its purpose. But I remember the one Sunday after I turned the church over, it was a couple months later. um I was neither I was neither preaching. Okay, so in our congregation, we split the role of the MC of the service
Mm-hmm.
and the preacher. The preacher is never the MC, and the MC is never the preacher. So two people are really kind of leading the meeting in that way, and it's a beautiful way to sort of decentralize some of the graces. And so I was neither emceeing the meeting nor was I preaching. I had absolutely no responsibility whatsoever. And on that Sunday, I sat in the second row. And I had several people in the church come up to me and said, are you under discipline? Why aren't you on the front row? And there were a few moments that you could feel sort of that carnal thing rise up, like, I'm sitting in the second row of my own volition, but nobody in the front row asked me to sit on the front row. I have to admit, it did occur to me. But then I thought, isn't this liberating
Mm-hmm.
that, this is a congregation I invested over 30 years of my life into. 35 years of my life into it. And I can very happily sit in the second row, be totally at peace with this, and actually see it as a promotion. And hear from the Father,
It's good.
job well done, son.
Mhm.
Because it's not my church. It's not my pulpit. It's his.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, Mark, it was a liberating moment. I kind of wish I wish every senior pastor could go through something similar to that experience, because I think it's always hard, because at one point we go through an early phase in ministry where we have to accept responsibility. And our leadership depends on our ability to accept responsibility and shoulder in the grace of God. But you know what I mean?
Sure.
It's like there's somebody that's the answer for this thing, and it's God's will. You can't just blow it off and say, well, it's God's church. It's not my church. It's God's church. That can also be a cop-out.
Sure.
And irresponsible. So a good shepherd will shoulder that thing. And it's just like this parallel track that we constantly have to walk on as a leader, where it's like, okay, I'm accepting responsibility, but at the same time, I'm dying to this idea that it's mine. I'm dying to ownership.
Come on. Right.
So I accept responsibility, but I die to ownership. It's not mine, it's his.
That's right.
And you know what? You can hear it in language. So I'm walking in covenant with a brother of a very beautiful church, fast growing. It's in a fairly large city, and you hear it. He's like, oh yeah, I've got to find $1.5 million to pay for my parking lot. I'm thinking, at his house, why would his parking driveway cost? No, then I realized, oh no, he's talking about the church. Like, dude, that's not your parking lot. I said, it is my parking lot. I said, that's not your parking lot. It's our parking lot. Why is it now your part? You have to find the money and you have to pay. So there is this balance. And like with everything else in life.
Absolutely. I mean, what I don't want is find out that I was the blind leading the blind. I don't want to be the one that kept them out.
Yeah.
And I guess you could even, this could actually be a couple episodes now. I can cut it up in that manner. But in the reality of it is, let's go to this. If the prodigal son would have ran into the big brother before he got to the father, the big brother probably would have ran him off the farm.
Wow, that's true.
But because he came back to the father,
yes,
and that's what we need. We need to fathers, and we know fathering
Yes.
is not anatomical; it's positional.
yes,
So therefore, even women can help grow and disciple and
Mhm.
shepherd people.
yeah, sure.
But I think that's probably one of the biggest things of the lack of maturity.
Hmm.
I used to think that I had to have all 5 ministries and grace gifts under the house roof. When I said you can't do that, because if they really are operating in that, and the field is plentiful, but the workers are few, they're out and about. How do you get all 5 ministries? And the Lord say, no, that's not how this works. I will send them to you.
Yeah, yeah,
And so one of the things, if you wanted to say, I got to be careful because I'm not going to create methods and formulas. Obviously now we got the G12, and this is how you evangelize, and they have all these nice little
Yeah.
books that will come out. For me, the Spirit is having to teach me as a leader of what it looks like for us in this specific location,
Sure.
in this geographic location.
yeah,
And for me, it's been first, he had to start with, like a lot of the services. Twice a month, I do this, what I'm doing with you, with another minister.
wow.
So we
Great.
do it. We do this. What now is what it looks like on a Sunday morning. Sometimes we'll have 3, and I'll ask the people. They'll come to me afterwards. I love it because I'm hearing 3 different viewpoints under one subject.
Wow.
And what that does, it kind of breaks up this one man's personality
Yeah,
that you get addicted to,
right.
right? And so now that's one part he used.
Hmm.
Obviously, there's multiple things, but also by bringing in people, we just don't. Back in the day, everything I do is through relationship. right?
Mm.
So I don't fly people in that wrote a book or are on TBN or some big name. I don't know you. If I don't know you, you're probably not going to get to speak at the Father's house unless the Lord makes that clear, which he
Yes.
hasn't in all these
Yeah.
years. Everything is built on relationship with him and
Yeah.
each other. So my knowing your fruit, knowing you well enough to know you, that the house can trust you, I can
Mm.
trust you, that you can come and you can have autonomy to minister what the Lord said there. But you're also bringing in a prophetic side to you. You have a prophetic side to you. You're an amazing teacher, so you're
Mm.
bringing the teaching side as well. There is an apostolic call on your life, and I do believe it can take many, many years
Mm-hmm.
for you to come into the fruition of the maturity of that office. But you can see glimpses of it in people as they're moving forward in life.
Sure. Sure.
We like to give titles to people that probably they're not ready, or the big brother. And when you do that, then the entitlement comes with it. Well, if
Yeah.
you give it to a father, he's
Mm.
like, hold on a minute. I don't like labels. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
A father rejoices in
Right.
everybody else's accomplishments.
Right.
The father rejoices in watching people go through the breakthrough and in working through that circumstance, and they come out on the other side and they rejoice. They don't get jealous.
Mm-hmm.
The father doesn't get jealous when other people prosper. They actually start
Right.
to rejoice, because that was the whole point of laying your life down so that other people can finally find life.
Yes.
So that is probably a big missing ingredient.
Yeah.
But if we're going to continue to have the big brother syndrome, it may fall short of what God's intentions are for true
Mm.
reconciliation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like that's really a big part for me of, okay, Lord, you have to teach me by the Spirit how to do this. But the moment I put a menu together, the moment I take the way he's taught me how to do it and tell everybody they have to do it the way I do it, I'm shorting them.
Yeah.
I'm doing the same thing to them that I do if I'm not careful from the pulpit, of telling them how to act as a Christian, what they're supposed to look like as a Christian, and don't even realize I could be conforming them into my image.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to really awaken, really, you need a father to come to.
Yes.
You need someone who can really listen, see, be able to tell hard truths that you need and you're thankful for. You actually get more respect
Yeah.
when you actually tell people the truth.
Yeah.
But because of the fear of man, we would like to use flattery. We would try to do whatever we can so that we are afraid to lose somebody, to not offend them.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking to places to offend people. The reality of it is, if the spirit of truth comes on me and I speak truth, that truth is a true friend is the wounds,
Yeah.
right? That as long as it's coming through truth and not opinion,
Right.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I know when I make a mistake and I use and I had to do this just the other day to my son. He's got a business in Charleston, and I began to speak to him. And after I got off the phone, the Lord said to me, you're a little rude to him on the phone because he didn't measure up to your expectations. You need to call him back and tell him you're sorry.
Wow.
The cool thing about it is, when I did call him back, he's like, I didn't take it that way at all, Dad. I still took it as you caring for me. He said, so no worries.
Wow.
It's
Beautiful.
kind of cool that
Yeah.
happened. But the Lord, see, my son, even though he saw it, my caring side, the Lord said to
Yes.
me,
Yeah.
I was still a little edgy on that. I was promoting something because I was not satisfied with his results.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I had to grow up to be a father. I had to hear the Father.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then I can mirror, which we're technically, if you think about it, we are mirrors.
Yes.
That's why when someone comes into Robert's life and hangs out with you long enough and they walk away from you, they forget what manner of man they are. Right? But they have to come back because you're representing a version of the Father that they need.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's not being prideful to say this. And I understand that in my life. But when they leave, they forget what it meant. So if you can only come on Sunday and I'm your only mirror on Sunday,
Yeah.
well, what happens the rest of the week?
Right.
You can call me up on the phone. You can say, I'm going through a hard time. I can call you up on the phone and ask for help. But this frequency that is really a part of the problem, that we only meet once a week, don't even get a chance to know each other.
No.
But if we're actually fathering,
Yeah.
and we have a generation of fathers, then all of a sudden there's 2 or 3 around you
Right. Right.
that on a weekly basis, like you said, what did you read in
Yes.
the Word and get? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now this mirroring's going on. So there's a
Yeah.
faster rate of growth and maturity because they're actually looking into the mirror of liberty
Yeah.
and they're getting free. And then all of a sudden, as they grow up in the Lord and they get to a
Mm,
place of maturity, hopefully they will now become autonomous in the Lord, and
mhm.
now they will become a mirror to another group of people.
Yes. Yeah.
That's how this thing works.
Yeah.
But the mirror is also in the Word. We mirror when we're seeing Jesus and beholding Him in our prayer time, but
Mm,
we forget, and I think we over spiritualize it because we keep saying Jesus is coming vertical, but we forget He's actually coming horizontal.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
Jesus in you and the Jesus in me wants to manifest, but it has to be done through relationship.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's that part of that maturing process I think we're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I even made sense what I just said.
Yeah.
That was just a flow of my
Sure.
heart of what
Sure.
I'm seeing happen, um,
Yeah.
and the need, the
Mm,
need.
mm,
How do we, if we're going to move, like both of us come from very big backgrounds of big church. So please
mm.
don't misunderstand us. What we're saying here, it's not like we're going to pick on the big guy because we're the little guy. No, we came from
Sure.
a place. I came from a 2,000
Yeah.
member
Yeah.
place. We helped build it in the place we were in before we came here in North Carolina. It was huge. And that's when the Lord had said to me clearly, He said,
Mm,
Mark, you don't need me anymore. And I freaked
mm,
out on my riding mower and jumped off and said, what do you mean I don't need you anymore? I was so
mm,
clear. He said, your leadership gifting will take you where you want to go.
mm.
But if you want to follow me, I've got to slow you down so I can speed up. I had no idea what that meant.
Wow.
10
Wow.
years of going to the backside of a desert. And the only treasure I cared about in those 10 years was to know him.
Wow. Beautiful.
But the fire and the heat and the time of allowing his love to have its perfect way in me
Yeah.
could not be oversimplified.
Yeah.
I
Beautiful.
had to allow the process.
Yeah.
But there was what kept us from bailing? Why didn't you quit on Monday morning every Monday after a Sunday?
Yeah. I don't know.
Love.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to think it was something noble, actually, Mark. I
This ought to be
the
interesting.
Lord stuck me over in a country hostile to the gospel at the time, and burned every bridge I had back in America. Yeah, I had no options. I would have left, I think. I'm pretty sure I would have.
So I'm the guy's a big
You
prisoner
know.
of Christ.
Yeah, in a
Yeah.
way, God stuck me in a place. Yeah, you talked about the backside of a desert.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't know anybody that God's powerfully using or has used in the past that didn't have that experience of
That's
being
right.
stuck in a place of death and watching every Isaac you ever saw come into being die. And it's a horrible place. Nobody, listen, you if you wrote a book about it, no one would buy it. It would be
Understood.
the number one worst
Worst.
seller of all time.
It's so depressing.
It is. It's kind of like, here's the cross.
Right.
Die.
Right.
You're gonna die. Everything you ever hoped for, every promise you've ever been given, everything will die. But um, I yeah, I mean, there have been times that I think I look back and I go, yeah, thank God that He gave me courage to really press in. When our second daughter, died of a blocked aorta 6 days after birth. That took some courage, and God met me in that trial. The why didn't I quit ministry? There was nothing much courageous about it, and I actually worked um, as best as I could for about a 2-year period to destroy the church. I purposely refused to pray. I would refuse to read the Bible. I told people stop evangelizing, and the church doubled in 2 years. How do you explain that? And I was so angry at God for blessing me when all I wanted Him was to kill this thing to give me a good excuse to leave France, go back to the U.S.
Oh my.
And He didn't. So I think in those cases, everybody has their own story to tell. Um, So yeah, I was not any sort of a shining example of courage, Joseph in the prison and pressing into God and getting dreams and revel. No, I was pathetic, bellyache, victim mentality, accusing God, angry. Yeah,
Eeyore.
yeah, very much. Eeyore, spirit of Eeyore got on me. Um, I really don't know what it was that where God came and rescued me out of that, but He did, and I'm eternally grateful. Um,
And just to be clear, same journey for me as well.
really,
But yet we're
yeah,
still here.
we are,
You get that call in the beginning, like David. Oh
yeah,
man, I'm called. I'm excited. You paint your picture, right? Here we go. Go back to the picture frame. We've
yeah,
decided what the picture frame looked like, what the picture was
yes,
going to look like. We prescribed it, and the next thing you know, it's not turning out the way we think. How
yes,
many years did it take between the anointing of Samuel to the kingship? And that's the
yeah,
journey, that why we need the fruit of the spirit.
yeah,
That's why patience
yes.
has its perfect way in you.
Well, think about it. Saul reigned 40 years. 40 years Saul reigned as king. And David was anointed within the first few years of Saul's reign
That's right.
by Samuel.
Yep.
And then after Saul died and Jonathan died, only Judah recognized David as king. And the other tribes rebelled against him. They went through a 7-year civil war.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different estimations, but the one that I looked at that seemed to hold some stock estimated that during that civil war, 7 years of civil war, over 10% of the population died. It was a tithe. Think about this. David was the called, the anointed, and brothers are killing brothers
Mm-hmm.
in one of the worst. I can't think of another time, actually. I mean, each of the tribes had their issues, and there were some infightings, back in the time of the judges. But I don't think Israel ever suffered a 7-year civil war outside of David's reign. And so you can imagine just the trauma that he refused to give up. And he could have at any point, after the sin with Bathsheba, he could have given up. After the rebellion of Absalom, he could have given up. I mean, there's so many opportunities for David to give up.
He could have given up on himself for his own
Yes.
issues, which probably
Yeah.
would probably be the biggest one, probably in ministry today, is when people actually feel like they have become a failure and they don't deserve to be in the spots they are, but even though you're called to it.
But
Exactly.
there's something in David, and that's what God's looking in guys like you and guys like me, that honestly, at the end of the day, we don't really bring much to the table of the Lord. It's all Him,
It's all him.
you know. And what little bit we think we bring usually gets burnt.
How much more?
Yeah, you know. And my hope would be that whoever's listening, to this broadcast would just take hope that whatever God started, no matter how long it takes, God is committed to see it through.
Yes.